Practice and Outcomes stream of the SNOMED CT Expo 2021. My name is Peter Groves-Williams. I am a technical specialist at SNOMED International, and I will be moderating today's session. Please use the live Q&A in your AirTouch device to type your questions to the presenter. All questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. I'm now pleased to introduce Filip Veldeman of Terra Nova Healthcare, who will be presenting the journey from free text problem lists in hospital discharge letters to friendly, clinical used and shared SNOMED CT structured problem list. Filip, please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Peter, for the introduction, and hello, everybody. Today's a central problem list and how to get there and how to make it structured in SNOMED CT. And so I will tell you a bit about the journey that I went through over the past years on different projects that were basically concerning this topic. So to start, I would like to point out that there is a major difference between a patient history and a problem list. And often those terms are used one for the other, and it tends to become a bit confusing for project leaders or vendors or to know, okay, what exactly are you meaning with that, and what are we talking about, and what are we trying to accomplish here? So I think it's good to start with that. When I talk about the patient history, I mean the patient history like it's written in discharge letters, basically in a hospital setting. And so this patient history, because different doctors make their own, or different departments, cardiology, orthopedic surgery, different departments have different patient histories that they use in their letters. There's good ones and there's bad ones, there's overlaps and holes. There's also a lot of departmental details in there, and yeah, mostly all of the time in free text. And also, doctors are not impacted by somebody else's patient history. I may have a good one and you a bad one, or vice versa, or just a different one. But yeah, we are not impacted by that. And the source, when you build it, when you make it, when you use it, is often to go look for a good discharge letter, a good previous history, and copy paste it in your own letter. The fact that those histories are not complete, I said, yeah, there can be holes in it, but sometimes this is also intentionally, as the focus is basically in the context of the patient visit and of what is relevant for that patient to mention in that particular letter on that patient contact. So that is what I mean by patient history. On the other hand, you have a problem list, and a problem list is something entirely different. A problem list sits on the level of the electronic patient records, and of that, there's only one shared problem list that is also commonly managed by all the doctors in the hospital, and it should give a good overview, a synthesis of what's going on with the patient at the level of detail above the different specialties. So that is useful and meaningful for the pediatric surgeon, or for a cardiologist, or for the different specialties in the hospital. So not in a way that everything diving into all specialistic details of your own specialty. If you have only one, and if you manage it there, you need also consensus and guidelines on how to do it. I'll come back to that later. And so this problem list is basically the single source of the history in your letter. So instead of copy pasting like before, you will use that as a source to drag information to your letter. So it's important also in the context of this presentation, in the context of your projects, that you define well what you mean by those terms. Also, there may be some differences depending on the possibilities of your EPR, whether, for instance, a patient history, or you're then talking only about diagnosis, or about diagnosis and procedures. So is that the same thing, or different things, split or not split? So these things have to be clear, so that everybody knows what we're talking about. Okay, so the journey that I want to talk to you about is already going on for a number of years. And in 2007, I had projects where I made diagnosis catalogs with customers, specifically for cardiologists or for gastroenterology or pneumology and so on. But the idea at that time was more, how can we come to an optimal reporting also from to give good input to the coding people, because coding also relates to billing. And so the better you report, the better you also take care of your billing process. And so the coding that was behind those lists was ICD-10. So that was a bit of a different purpose, but it was already interesting to see, okay, what are specialists' problem lists, not problem lists, but specialists' diagnosis lists, for instance. We also used this time of the project to see, okay, can we come up with tooling to represent a problem list and to share information across specialties, and to show it and to document it, to have also a synthesis of what's going on with this patient as a whole. And those tools and catalogs were then used, especially the tools in EPR audits in later projects, to document, in fact, the audit of, okay, how well is the problem list structured in this hospital? How good or how complete is the overview that we have of our patients? Do we have a lot of overlaps, a lot of missing things? So it was basically to support this synopsis or this synthesis effort. And later on came a project in a hospital which was called the Atlas project, where we used this expertise to actually build a core medical record, een kerndossier in Dutch. So a record that contains the information that is of value above all specialties. So a central medication list, a central problem list. So the things, a central view on the whereabouts of the patient on previous visits and stuff like that. So that was a project that was started at the time to get ready for a bigger implementation of a next generation patient record. But the idea was to already start consolidating, start streamlining, start standardizing to get ready for then later the future migration. And so this allowed us to go from these different departmental silo EPRs with all their departmental medical histories to a single problem list. And the actual integration work or the synthesis was made by the doctors themselves. So we moved to a database with problem list lines, at that time in free text. And then the project was continued around end 2016, 2017, to start, okay, in the new medical record, those lines will be structured with SNOMED CT. So what will we do to go from free text problem list lines to structured SNOMED CT problem list lines? That was also the time when I came in touch with SNOMED CT and the content management course and the implementation course and so on. And so then we started a project called the Rosetta project, which as a stone of Rosetta also had 2 languages, Dutch and English, and 3 writings, free text, SNOMED CT, and ICD-10. And at the time, we also had in 2018 with the Belgian Medical Informatics Association or Congress on Semantic Interoperability. And in the margin of the Congress, we also had a SNOMED hackathon with a lot of NLP vendors to see, okay, what is the status, in fact, of this technology and what can it bring or how can it help us to annotate discharge letters and assign SNOMED CT codes and help the process of structuring free text problem list lines to SNOMED CT. And that is now evolving into other projects where we do those 2 steps. In fact, the step of the synthesis, like in the Atlas project, and the structurization to SNOMED CT, like the Rosetta project, in one move. So from letters right to a structured problem list. And there we use quite some pre-validation and some AI, as I will mention later. There's a lot of hurdles when you talk about projects like these. The main ones, you can group them in 3 different categories. And those categories are, on the left side, the more technical ones that have to do with integration of third-party software and EPRs that are a lot of the times process integration oriented and less data oriented. There's things like technical representation, And then also content versus code, that you see, yeah, if the underlying content changes, that sometimes the behavior, the functional behavior of the software changes, and then people start making software patches for content changes and all those funny things that can happen. Then on the content part, yeah, you want the content that you offer to be clinically useful, correct, well organized, not too little, not too much, not too general, not too broad, ready for reuse as well if possible. And then there's all kinds of things that have to do with governance and legal issues and training and making the whole thing fit for purpose and user-friendly. But I will pick out some of those things and I will bundle them. I thought, yeah, let's go for some insights as we have only 20 minutes. And then let's pick the insights that gave me a sort of aha-erlebnis, something that's give me an insight and I thought this is interesting to share, tell you a bit the story, where did this come from, and then share the lessons learned with you. Okay, coming back to the difference between patient history and problem list, you see here that we made some technical choices in this Atlas project where we separated main lines, and those were problem list lines, with details fields where you could go into more departmental detail. The main lines were structured, SNOMED CT, later on in the second Rosetta phase, and the details fields were free text. We also had, for those main lines, a two-letter functionality to make it easy to use them on the letters. And you could always see the line owner who had changed the line, and also in an easy way, an audit trail, what was the line looking like before. There's a small example here. Also, we made some guidelines that these topics of the problem list, these lines, the flag always needed to cover the load, so that people don't have to click open all the details fields to be aware of what's going on. So it really had to give a synthesis of the full picture of the patients. Okay, we also had a medical validation team to accomplish that. And I come to some of those topics later on, but having guidelines or procedures, it's like traffic rules and regulations. If you do something together, yeah, you really need people to know, okay, what's the traffic looking like? How am I supposed to behave in this new environment? Another insight was, you know that doctors don't like coding. In fact, most of them hate it. They're also afraid of losing nuance or details when they have to choose something out of a pick list. And when they have to use pick lists, they are annoyed if they don't find what they need, or if the list is way too long. On the other hand, they agree that it makes sense to use certain concepts in a bit of a uniform clinical way and not have 27 ways to describe arterial hypertension, for example. And also, if you have the time in the project to go into interaction to see, okay, what exactly do you mean with this, and is different than that, and how does it relate to coding and to maybe financing or to your clinical use, that helps a lot to also to have a better user experience for the doctors, but also to understand each other and to understand how they are working. Speed up a little bit in view of the time. Important to know is also that there is a threshold on a problem list quality. If you reach it, it's like with speech recognition, it's magic. If you don't reach it, then it may be lousy, or people may say, what is this, and it is rubbish, or it's not complete, and then people will start abandon it. And then it's a pity that all the efforts is then for nothing in the worst case. So therefore, we also have projects where it's important to pay attention to the migration, so that you don't have to start with an empty page, and that you really have a good start. And as they say, a good start is half the battle. So that's really something that we pay attention to. Also to make the solution practical, stable, and fast. Other points that are here on the slide have to do with more the support, communicating about the advantages, on how to use the EPR, the guidelines, the support, but I'll come back to that on the next slide. On the topic of NLP, here you see on the top part of the slide the production process of the NLP. The bottom slide is more the quality control and the audit trail. There's different points where you see so patient selection, document selection, NLP. The pre-validation is here an important one, as we really try in advance to give extra weight or extra quality or quality control or pre-validation to the lines before migrating them. And then after migration, there is technical control. And then finally, it's the doctors who do the clinical validation and who have to do an active acceptance of the migrated information in the new medical records. There's lots of quality control and audit trail underlining that process, so that at all times we know if we see something in the medical record, where does it come from, and if something is not good, where did this happen, and how can we improve that? The students, the medical students, play an important role in that. We have a quality team of students that help checking results of the individual NLP, but also compare results of versions, check the guidelines if they're good, check the overall result of the problem list. And basically, thanks to the students, we have a database with golden standards, meaning if they would make the problem list themselves, what would it look like? What would they choose? What would they use as SNOMED codes? Then we have the results of the NLP, where the students give line per line a label. This is a positive line, a good line, or a negative line, a bad line, and why. Maybe if a negation was missed, obviously that's a negative label. But sometimes there's also softer evaluations, in the sense that technically the NLP was good, for instance, but the term was way too vague and was no candidate or problem list candidate, so we might still leave it out. So that's two different ways of looking at this problem list, and they also check for patterns and things that can improve. Now, in view of the size of the project that we're working on right now, with over 2 million patients, it's a 3,000 bed environment. We use, or we try to automate this pre-validation effort. And one of the things that we do is use structured information, ICD-10, CM, and PCS, that is sitting in a data warehouse, the information of the coding that we use. To see, okay, do we have information there that is actually reinforcing or validating the information that we have from the NLP? And we use, thanks to the help of the Belgian NRC and National Library of Medicine, we got, for instance, for the procedures, the MAGPIE validation rules. We're also looking at other information and rules that we can use. We saw there that there is variation in coding, that also the strict coding rules in the context of financial things can be a bit loosened up for the pre-validation of NLP. If we know we found an appendectomy, you can see, okay, if it's laparoscopic or open, for the pre-validation, it's less important than for the billing. So we can be a bit more relaxed on those rules. And so PCS data are also available of the last 10 years, but if somebody had an old appendectomy, or one that has not been done in your own hospital group, we don't have the data to make the rules work. So more and more we use also artificial intelligence. Of course, NLP is artificial intelligence specifically to annotate and to assign SNOMED codes, but we also use descriptive analysis to find patterns, relationships, connect dots. Predictive analysis, where we try to predict the outcomes that the students make with new lines that we get. Based on the data sets that we have, we try to predict in advance, this will probably be a good line or probably a bad line. For those who are interested in an introduction on the topic of AI and data analysis, this is a very good book on business analysis that really is a good starting point for those kinds of technologies. Two more slides, the importance of governance in general and clinical leadership. I will briefly mention a missed opportunity beginning of 2012, where we had a project where we would produce a structured problem list using an e-health technical standard that was used in Belgium, but that also happened to be the standard that was mainly used by GPs. And to make a long story short, the GPs thought that the hospital was trying to take over their responsibility to manage the global medical record, which was a GP task. That was not the case. We wanted to collaborate and to use the same technical standard for semantic interoperability. But things like that, if it's not well managed, or if you don't if you don't have the proper channels for governance, can be missed and can lead to misunderstandings and to a no-go for a project. A very positive example was the clinical validation team that we worked with this Atlas project. We had there a close cooperation with the doctors and with both development team, terminology team, implementation team. Remember the 3 types of hurdles. We had a lot of personal contacts between the people working on the project to define traffic rules and also to set really concrete examples, because in the beginning we talked about problem list and then people think of problem-oriented medical record and reporting, and if it's too vague, you start to get into principle discussions, and then it can become very difficult to get to where you want to be. But even then, with the best understanding, it's also important to have some control in place, because people are always very creative to find ways around what you're trying to do. So you still need to make some checks if everything is going as planned. So I leave it there to keep some time for questions. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. You find my contact details here, so please stay in touch. I think this is a very exciting subject. I'm working on this all day to make it work. So if I can help you in one way or another, or if there's things you want to discuss just now or later on, feel free to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip, for your presentation. Can I ask that attendees give us a moment while we switch over from our pre-recorded content so that Philip can address the questions you have been submitting live. Please note that this session will be available on the event platform for the next 3 months. And we're live. Thank you very much once again, Philip, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Can I invite delegates to enter questions into the live Q&A facility, which is part of the AirTouch device? And we'll see if any come through. We have 5 minutes left for questions. Philip, a question that I had was, how was your feedback from clinicians? I mean, I imagine you interacted with an awful lot of them over the years. What sort of things came up for clinicians?
Yeah, well, there's always very different types of clinicians. There we had in many projects a group of really interested physicians who took the lead and who were very happy to cooperate in this project and to make it happen. And then others that were, let's say, the silent majority, that were a bit skeptical at the beginning to see, okay, where will this go and will it be user-friendly enough? That's always a big criteria for them. Will it be fast enough? Will it don't stand in the way of my clinical work? But you see then that if you have good people who are also positioning the project in the hospital and explaining to colleagues and taking the clinical leadership for that, and if you can then manage to get it implemented in a practical way, then you see them gradually start to actually and also see the advantage of it, because the results of a shared problem list are far better than the scattered information in the letters. But there's always people who try to get their ways around it, and it takes some time to get everybody on board. Let me put it like that.
Yes, we have a related question from Fabian Franzek, which is, how do doctors enter coded content in the operational problem list?
Yeah, so actually we try not to talk too much about coded information. We try to make the drop-down lists as good as possible so that they can easily find what they need. We also prepared that in the in the whole migration project. When we were structuring the data with NLP, we worked with Early Tracks as a vendor, and the result was that apart from the exercise to migrate the information, we also had a ranking where we could see how much diagnosis and procedures were used, and with the ranking, so that could also help us or gave us insights into how much terms are used and which terms are used, so that we could try to make the drop-down lists also as recognizable as possible for the end users, that they don't find too much things and then they don't know what to choose, or that they find too little, so that we really try to tailor a bit the afterwards what we offer to them to choose from.
Yes, thank you, Philip. Another question from Kath Priest. How have you helped manage this change with clinicians? Have you demonstrated benefits of a structured record and helped address any gaps they might find in available content?
Well, one of the main things, it's always like with every new project, there's a lot of change management involved, and to some extent, it has to do with at the elbow training and explaining and re-explaining and helping them as much as you can to use it in their practical setting. What we found instrumental in running a common problem list was the audit trail that we have, so that you could at all times see, okay, who is on the last editing of a line, and also that it was easy for end users. In one click, they could see, okay, this used to be my line, but somebody has changed it, and they've changed it like this, so that you could see where is this coming from, where is this going to. It also helps being responsible, because your name was stuck on a line that you've put in, so that created some responsibility also towards your colleagues. And in the beginning, they called me to say, this guy has changed my line, and that's not. And I said, you don't have to call me. You have to talk to each other and see, okay, right. Or somebody threw out a line because it was a double, and that's also, these guidelines are also very important. But we had a quite broad group of people that helped making the guidelines and presenting them to their colleagues in the practical day-to-day work. But it's always it will always be a struggle. But once you come to a clicking point, or where you see, okay, now we're over this, and then they really start to see the benefits. But in the beginning, you have to be patient and have some endurance to keep going.
Well, Philip, I'm afraid we are out of time for this session, and apologies to anyone whose question we didn't manage to get to. Can I thank you very much once again for sharing your work and your insights with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And please feel free to contact me if there's any further questions. I'm happy to further communicate about those.